I know this is a key piece of evidence in the state's case, so I have to assume that it's there because this is what they are relying on. Yeah, I'm just looking at it just frame by frame there. I see something. I don't know if personally I see enough. There you go. That's it. That's the bag. I finally do see it, Dan. So this is going to be the key piece of evidence in the state's case because, as we know, it's very difficult to prosecute law enforcement in this country, especially when your witnesses have significant criminal histories like they do here.
And as a former prosecutor, what's it like to see video like this?
It's very disappointing because, I'm a former prosecutor and a former drug prosecutor. So oftentimes, I wouldn't prosecute possession cases on the federal side, so it's trafficking. But, you hear these stories about folks who are arrested for possession and they say that the drugs were planted or it wasn't mine. And, as a prosecutor, you always disregard that because that tends to be not a credible defense. But it actually is in this case. So this undermines our entire system of justice. When you have law enforcement engaging in this type of misconduct, it creates doubt across the board. So it's a significant problem. And I'm very glad that the state of Florida is pursuing this as aggressively as they are.
Well, the prosecutor discussed this stop in his opening statement yesterday. Let's take a listen to that.
Now, the defendant began the search of Ms. Odom's
evidence and the Harry Houdini, that sleight of hand. So that's something that the jurors are going to love. They love video, and there's no better evidence than video. But after that, this sort of pattern of Wester turning off his camera or turning it on too late, that's going to be important. You have someone who's hiding evidence, how he approaches these victims. That's going to show this jury that this isn't just an isolated incident. This is not, an individual victim that maybe you shouldn't believe because of his or her criminal history or the fact that they filed a civil lawsuit against Wester or any number of reasons that the defense is going to use to try to discredit these witnesses. That pattern, that's what the state is going to need to overwhelm the defense here. And we often see it in sexual assault cases where the state will bring forth multiple victims when they're concerned that the testimony of just one victim is insufficient. Well, that's why the state here has chosen these 12 individuals to put forth their case. Again, the defense here is basically going to be the best defense is a good offense. They're going to have to go after these victims, alleged victims, and say that this is a money grab. They're just trying to get their criminal cases dismissed, which by and large, they were all dismissed because of the allegations against Wester. And otherwise say that, look, this is about their civil lawsuits. Again, 11 of the 12 have filed those lawsuits, as well as folks that have a drug problem and have every reason to lie to the jury. So I think that's going to be the primary defense in this case, and that's what I anticipate. And again, Bowling was a very powerful witness for the reason that you just identified. He lost his daughter because of this arrest. I mean, let's just put it out there. The fact that drugs were planted in his vehicle, that his fiancée was driving, he lost his daughter. So, this just shows the real victims of what Wester was doing. And then, the cross-examination was just really what we expected. The first question was about Bowling's prison ID, right? You just got released from prison. And then the second question or second set of questions involved the civil lawsuit. So, the fact that nobody anticipated.
And the fact that these people didn't think that they would be believed.
And, when you're a prosecutor and you have these relatively minor drug offenses, I know they're serious for the victims here, but in the big scheme of our criminal justice system, possession cases, even methamphetamine are considered minor. You have to move the files as a prosecutor. You can't get bogged down. And unfortunately, these folks were victimized because of that. I mean, there's a reason that the vast majority of folks plead guilty. Very few cases go to trial because our criminal justice system can't accommodate, every case going to trial. So when the officer doesn't show up, Gabriel hit it on the head. You're a prosecutor, you have to what we call dispo the case, get rid of the case. So, in one situation, one particular victim was offered a misdemeanor time served deal, essentially slap on the wrist. The other one was offered an even better deal, which is pretrial diversion. Essentially, if, you either plead or you don't plead, but if you keep your nose clean and you don't get any problems for a period of time, usually about a year or so, then the case is dismissed. So,
does it seem to you?
It is a problem with our system.
Does it seem to you that that Zachary Wester, the officer here who's accused of doing this, planting drugs in people's cars, that he was operating with a sense of impunity, that he could get away with this and that no one would believe these victims.
No question. I mean, Wester thought that he was above the law. And this is more than just planting drugs, right? This is someone who had extramarital affairs when he was a sheriff. He sexually harassed other employees of the sheriff's department. I mean, he sent nude pictures of one woman he was having a relationship with other deputies. So, you know, this is someone whose father was a law enforcement officer, probably thought he was above the law, or certainly never conceived that he would be prosecuted like this. So based on the totality of his conduct, there's no question in my mind that Wester thought he was above the law. And I'm glad that he hopefully will be held accountable depending on what this jury does. Because unlike criminal defendants and victims in this case, the video doesn't lie. And it's tough to impeach based on bias and so forth. So you're really looking, in this particular video, you have to look frame by frame to see that little baggie and how Wester places it. So I love to lead with video evidence. That's why the prosecution did so in this case. It is really the strongest evidence and what the jury will hang its hat on when it goes into that deliberation.
Body camera until after he discovered the drugs. What does that say to you?
That's part of the good evidence for the state, that he's basically trying to either hide evidence or not create incriminating evidence. And this is part of the pattern and practice. That's what the state needs to prove here. Let's not forget that more than 100 cases were dismissed, and these are the 12 best victims that the state chose. And between them, they have apparently 33 criminal convictions. So they do have some baggage that the state has to work through. And obviously that's going to be fodder for cross-examination, that, you know, for instance, this particular witness had a felony warrant, and that's one of his reasons to come up there and to lie and to allegedly, you know, testify untruthfully so he can get out of these criminal problems that he has and make money from the state. And that's, again, good evidence for the prosecution. There's two very different stories here. One is a dirty police officer who's engaged in all sorts of misconduct, sexual misconduct towards folks that he's arrested, towards his colleagues in the sheriff's department, someone who's been fired for having extramarital relationships, someone who lies on his police report when he doesn't activate his body camera the whole time. And on the other, you have the story of these alleged criminals who will do anything to get their charges dismissed and make money. So two very different stories, and it's going to be up to just those 6 jurors in the state of Florida. You don't need 12 over there for a non-capital case. And I think if you're the defense, you want to get 1 or 2 to hang this jury that are going to have a tough time, because the body cam footage in her arrest that sparked this entire investigation. And if I'm the state, I focus on Wester's own statements during closing argument. Things like, you got to be careful who you trust. You know, I don't know where this methamphetamine came from, but I was the first person to see it there. It could have come anywhere, you know, because really this is a case about trust and an abuse of the public trust. And that's what you need to hammer home if you're the state here. What he did was so egregious and so wrong. He victimized all these folks. They're not criminals. They're not drug dealers. They're innocent. And it's people like this that cause the public to lose trust in law enforcement in this country. So, and really what the defense did on cross there was just what we expected. I wish the prosecution got out ahead of it. You know that they were going to focus on the criminal history, particularly the history related to honesty. And really the one question they asked was, you've been convicted of a crime involving dishonesty? She had to answer yes. So if I'm the state, I'd like to get ahead of those bad facts a little bit. Wish they did so in this case.
All right, well, it looks like there's a new witness that's just taken the stand. Let's go back to the courtroom to listen in.
Body camera videos in this case, correct?
Yes, I did.
And did that include a body camera video from Mrs. Teresa Odom's traffic stop, specifically which showed a search of the inside of her truck?
Yes, I did.
Did you specifically review a portion showing the defendant making entry to her truck and putting his search gloves on?
Yes, I did.
And did you then send that video to an FDLE digital evidence analyst.
Yes.
And why was that?
I wanted to see if I could get a better look at Deputy Wester's left hand.
That's all, Judge.
They generally consented to the search of the vehicle. They were all very surprised when drugs were purportedly found in their vehicle, and they were in disbelief. So the fact that their response was consistent with someone who's innocent, was consistent with someone who, had no idea that he or she had drugs in her vehicle, that bodes well for the prosecution.
And what are you looking to hear in the next stage of this trial? What do you think? Where do you think that the prosecution's going to go?
Prosecution is going to ramp up their case. We know that Odom was the best victim. She actually had to testify with a victim advocate because this was such a traumatic experience for her. That was very emotional, and I think the jury is going to pick up on that as well. I think we're going to start to pivot towards more law enforcement witnesses. Ms. Chase was the first one to lay the foundation for the analysis of the video. We know the video is the strongest evidence, and we're going to look for more senior folks in Florida law enforcement that are going to tell this jury what that video shows, because it didn't really come out during victim Odom's interview and examination.
And what about this search of people's vehicles? I think for a lot of people watching this trial, they would say, should I let a police officer look in my car? If I don't have anything to hide, should I let an officer inspect my vehicle?
The conventional wisdom, from an attorney perspective, is no. Officers generally need one of a few things to search someone's vehicle. Search incident to arrest. If you're arrested, officers can search your vehicle. Otherwise, they need probable cause that vehicle contains evidence of a crime or instrumentality of a crime. Again, that's not something that we had in this case. That's why the officer asked to bring the canine dog. The dog alerts to the vehicle. That would establish probable cause to search it for drugs. And the third reason, if the vehicle for some reason is impounded, then officers can search the vehicle incident to it being impounded. But generally, those are the three reasons. And again, conventional advice is, and this is coming from a former prosecutor, is don't consent to your vehicle being searched.
Yeah, that's a big headline here. And we do know that Officer Wester will take the stand for the defense, for his defense. What do you think the strategy will be for the defense in having Officer Wester take the stand in his own case?
Whenever a criminal defendant takes the stand in a trial, the entire focus of the jury will shift to that testimony. It will make or break the case. He better do an outstanding job during his direct examination, because those jurors are going to be watching every second of that testimony to see, is this someone who's truthful? Is this someone who's honest? Is this someone I should trust? Or is this someone I should convict and send to state prison? On the prosecution side, on the other hand, that sort of opens the door to all the misconduct that we've been talking about, not just these 12 victims, but everything else that he's done that has been dishonest, that has been deceitful, that has violated the public trust. And that's how, again, the state is going to try to dirty him up and make sure the jury does not like him and can return a guilty verdict.
And I think everyone's wondering what the motive may have been for planting these drugs. What was behind all of these actions that he's accused of?
And video has changed the game. We're going back to Rodney King, right? It was such an important case because it was caught on video. A very different time, of course, and even George Floyd, the discussion was, if there wasn't so much bystander video, would Derek Chauvin have been prosecuted for second-degree murder? And one of the things that the George Floyd death has really sprung is the Justice and Policing Act that's working its way through Congress that would mandate body cameras for at least federal law enforcement and provide incentives for both body cameras and videos for police for state and local law enforcement, because that really changes the game. That is the best evidence, and that's how criminal defendants can exonerate themselves. Unfortunately, sometimes, and we've talked about it, the system moves quickly, especially for these drug possession cases. Oftentimes these are repeat offenders. There's different types of drug court or programs to move these cases along quickly to get folks help. and otherwise dismiss the convictions, or instead of them being prosecuted as felonies, come down to misdemeanors. But unless there is this footage and you have both defense attorneys, both private and public defenders, that are actually reviewing the footage carefully to look for things like this, we're not going to have folks that are exonerated and officers like this who are prosecuted.
Well, it definitely raises a lot of red flags, and a call for change is definitely, this is proof of that. Well, let's take
The defense has to do exactly what they did there with that witness, which is go after the drug use, go after the civil suit and their bias and their reason to lie and why they're fabricating their testimony here today.
And for the prosecution, what do they have to do effectively if they're going to win?
They have to show this pattern that, notwithstanding, one individual that may have a reason to lie, it's witness after witness after witness. And Wester has done this repeatedly, more than 100 times. So this isn't just an isolated incident, and you need to trust these folks, notwithstanding their criminal history, notwithstanding their drug use, as opposed to Wester, who's someone who's dishonest and can't be trusted by you, the jury.
And lastly, what do you think is going to happen? Your prediction, your grand prediction, where's this case going to go?
I think we're going to see guilty verdicts here, Dan. And the reason is, we have so many witnesses, and I know how prosecutors try these cases. Normally, you have your law enforcement witnesses, a very clean case. Obviously, this is not that type of case. You're bringing a significant number of folks with criminal history. But I think the overwhelming weight of the evidence, you have so many victims, you have the body cam video, which is very powerful. And I expect that when Wester testifies, he's going to be beat up and cross-examined very aggressively. A lot of those bad facts are going to come out because he's going to open the door. The jury is not going to like him.
That's right. And we don't know, Neama, when he's going to take the stand quite yet. But when he does, that's going to be pretty powerful testimony and good TV. But thank you so much, Neama, for joining us. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll have more on this trial.